Thank you for coming, Leigh.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And really good to have you on In the Know. We've got lots to get around, obviously, with your role at CCMA. But to begin with, it's always good to kind of start at the beginning. So, who is Leigh and where are you from?
Who am I? Where am I from? Do you know what? That's a really good question, because I can't say that I am from this place. So one of the things I'm mindful of is my accent, and it's come up in conversation a few times recently around accents. So my accent is: my mum was a Brum, my dad was a Manc. I was born in Harpenden, and I've lived in the West Country and in Kent. So my accent doesn't say you're from here.
An eclectic mix.
A bit of an eclectic mix, but arguably, admittedly, I'm probably a southerner. But early years, very average height, average intelligence, just very, very average. Having said that, I think my dad had high hopes for me, but I didn't really deliver on that when I was at school. I liked having quite a lot of fun, and so I kind of failed my A levels.
Oh, wow.
Which wasn't very cool at the time. I was having a great time, I was having a great life, but yeah, failed my A levels. And actually that was I think that was the start of where I found some fight. Because I had to really fight to get into university. I really wanted to go to university, and I really had to fight to get into university. And I remember failing my A levels, phoning my granddad, and my granddad was, well, that's not very good, is it? And I thought, God, I've so let him down. And so I ended up sitting in those days with the phone in the hallway with the wire. So I'm in the hallway with all the broadsheet newspapers looking for any university that might have anything going for it. And I ended up with 11 HND offers and 2 degree offers. One of them was a 2-year Crammer business management course in Greenwich. And the other was a 4-year sandwich course in Southampton, which at the time was Southampton Institute. Southampton Solent these days. And it was the very first business IT degree in the country. And I look back at that and I think I was so lucky to get that opportunity, because I always wanted to do business studies at school, but actually I was, in these days, not very techie, but in those days I was quite techie. I was a bit into the coding.
Yeah.
So being able to do that at university was really cool. But it was also around at a time, there was something else happened in my life at that time. I had a 1 week that I think, when I look back, changed me massively, changed my direction in life. I turned 18 on the Sunday. This is in August. I turned 18, I had a big party on the Sunday. I turned 18 on the Monday. I got my A-level results out on the Thursday, which I'd failed. On the Friday, my parents split up.
Oh.
And it was one of those weeks where you're like, and then fighting to go to university, and then do I really want to go because I want to be at home? My parents had quite an acrimonious divorce. Anyway, I went to university and didn't do brilliantly, but I then had my dissertation year, where the dissertation that I did was in marketing. And where I'd just kind of gone to university and I got myself through the lessons, and again, I was having a great time, but my dissertation was all about creating a marketing plan. And what I found was I actually quite loved what I was learning. So I used to spend hours in the library or with books at home learning a lot of Kotler. So Kotler is the kind of guru of marketing. And I just learned loads and loads, put everything into my dissertation, and ended up with a 2-1 in my degree, honours. So the honours bit being the fact that actually my dissertation was quite good. And then I realised that actually marketing was the direction that I probably needed to go in.
So the beginning of like overcoming adversity and channeling a passion into something. So marketing then, so from uni, what was the first kind of marketing exploits that you kind of went into?
Yeah, so the my sandwich job, that 18 months, 12, 15 months that you get in a sandwich degree, I managed to get myself a job at a company called Quality Manufacturing Systems. So working in the manufacturing space, it was a sales and marketing assistant to the sales director, and it was tech. So it was quality compliance tech, it was manufacturing tech, there was financial tech in there. I enjoyed the marketing role. The sector wasn't quite something I really wanted to go back into. And bearing in mind, this is 30 years ago. I remember going to the NEC, being on the stand as a 20-year-old, and the people that were walking the stands and everybody else there were men, and to me, old men as a 20-year-old. And I thought, you know what, I'm not sure this is a sector I want to be in. And so after university, I remember writing to so many technology companies looking for a job. And I got an interview for a company called, God, what were they at the time? CSB Meridian was their name at the time. They rebranded to Prima Solutions. And I got this interview. I went and had a chat with Nick, and he said, so 15 months, 12, 15 months, is that what you're looking for? And I said, no, I'm looking for a job straight out of university. And he said, oh, leave that with me. And I stayed with them for 5, 6, 7 years. And that's where I really cut my teeth in marketing. My senior boss there, one of the CEOs there, was just brilliant. He really helped me understand. I used to go and write case studies with clothing. It was a specialist clothing tech. I remember going and visiting CEOs when I'm like 24 and interviewing them for how they're using the tech, and going back and writing it. And I was absolutely taking on board all of the feedback that I was getting, and really trying to hone my craft, I guess, in marketing. So I loved it.
And is that one of your kind of first inspirational people that you worked with or still reflect on, or who else other than that have you kind of noticed along the way that has kind of shaped you as a leader yourself?
So there's two people that gave me that. When you ask me that question, there's two people that spring straight to mind based on specific feedback that they gave me that I like to think that I've worked on. One of them was John Norman at Prima Solutions, and he said to me I wasn't strategic enough. And it was like, I don't really know what that means. But I've always kept it, if you like, just in the back of my head, not strategic enough. And the other one actually is someone who works in the contact center industry, is Andy Roberts, who is the group CEO of Sabio. He was my boss for 7 years, and he told me I wasn't commercial enough.
Wow.
And
brutal.
Yeah, really quite brutal. But I heard it, and I've now better understood it. And arguably, I'm still not commercial enough. But I've understood why that I had that feedback, and the strategic point, I've understood why, and it doesn't mean that I'm therefore always really strategic or always really commercial, because sometimes I think actually that's not, certainly in the space that I'm in now and what we do at the CCMA, being commercial isn't actually always the right answer.
So after those kind of interviewing CEOs and that kind of stuff, doing that role, what came next, and why move from that to something else?
So I haven't been there for a while, and I was up in the Midlands, and I wanted to head back down south where my family were, and so I started looking for various jobs, and arguably I'd also met my now husband up in the Midlands, and we were thinking, right, what should we do? And I remember going for a job interview, and I didn't get the job. I got down to the last 2, and I didn't get the job, and I was a bit gutted about it. One of the pieces of feedback that, again, it's one of those stories you hang on to. One of the pieces of feedback I had was, I'm not serious enough. And I thought, wow, I'm not serious enough. I thought, thought I was quite serious. Again, I've taken that on board. I've reflected on it, and I've gone, it's okay
Yeah.
not to be serious enough. And if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying life, then
Yeah.
what's the point?
Yeah, you're kind of lying to yourself in terms of kind of what you want to do, really.
Yeah. So
So that job didn't come off, and then so where did you go?
So that is when I moved down to London, and that is when I then went and interviewed with Sabio. And Sabio was 3 years old. I think at the time there was about 25, 30 people in the business, really quite small. And I loved the vibe. It just felt really warm and welcoming. And I thought, actually, this is somewhere where I don't have to be completely serious all the time.
Yeah.
And again, that was my first foray into contact centers. And for me, it was that I'd been in manufacturing, which felt a bit nichey. I'd been in the clothing and footwear industry, which felt quite niche. And now being in contact centers, I was like, well, that's quite niche. We know what the parameters are of contact centers. We know where they start and where they end. So I quite like that about contact centers.
But I suppose from the other industries you're in, you were suddenly going from something that was probably quite safe and repetitive now into something at the time that you joined Sabio, especially with the tech angle being a bit of a roller coaster, a bit entrepreneurial. So is that something that you probably thought you always wanted to do?
Do you know, it's really funny. So when I first came into the industry, I had no clue what a contact centre was. No clue. And I remember being given the Contact Centre for Dummies book and reading that through and really trying to understand it. And that entrepreneurial piece, I had a friend of mine at the time who, in fact, no, let me go back even further. So in about 1999, a friend of mine interviewed me because she was doing a marketing podcast, and she pulled it out and showed me the transcript from the recording that we were doing. And in that recording, I'd actually turned around and said that one day I wanted to be a marketing consultant. I couldn't remember saying that. So when I think of my time in all these different businesses, all really quite small businesses at the time, and the learning that I got from a culture side of things, but also bringing in new processes because there were small businesses that were growing, and then seeing the financial management of some of these things. That for me has been really quite inspirational and learning, but that entrepreneurial piece I think came in a little bit later. So I left Sabio when I had twins. They were 2 years old, and I was thinking, actually, I probably need to just turn my attention to them for a little while. And I remember at that time thinking, right, I'm now a marketing consultant. I can spend all my number one priority is the kids. The reality is that when you're a consultant, your number one priority is bringing money in. Yeah. So the balance wasn't quite what I'd anticipated, but loved the independence, loved the freedom, loved the entrepreneurship side of things. And throughout that time, my anticipation of running something, that was what it was. It was running something. I remember having all sorts of conversations with potential business ownership or leadership, but none of them felt right. None of them really felt right. And I think that the reason they didn't feel right was because they didn't have the right purpose behind them. And I think the purpose piece for me kicked in when I was on the board of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I was elected onto the board there, and for me that was a stepping stone in the career. It was how am I going to learn? I need to get out there. I need to see what's going on in the rest of the world. Got elected onto the board, and I remember it was a tough time for CIM, and I remember sitting in this room in London, surrounded by a lot of men, and we were talking about the financial stability of the Chartered Institute of Marketing at the time. And I've been careful not to overshare, but one of the things that came out of that conversation was actually we're not sure what the future of that organisation was. And I came out of that meeting and I thought, that's a chartered body. It's my membership body as a marketer. And the phrase that went through my head was, this isn't going anywhere. It was kind of a not on my watch, over my dead body kind of thing. And that fight kicked in. And what materialized literally over the next 12 months was I found myself as chair of the board, working with Chris Daly, the CEO, and he turned it around. Some people will say, that I played a part in that. I think the part I played was I enabled him to turn it around. But that for me was that whole, that's all volunteer work. It was a real purpose driven. There was a real need to really help a body, but help an industry. And when I think about what we do now at the CCMA, and when people say, what gets you out of bed, I'm like, oh my God, we have an opportunity to really support and help develop an entire industry. As a marketer, I was saying this yesterday, as a marketer, I'm getting to market an industry, not just a product or a service or a brand, but an entire industry. And that's exciting.
What did you learn in that period when you were doing consulting, bringing a family up, all of those kind of balancing the tricks that lots of working mums, parents, not just mums, but parents have to have? What did you learn most out of that period?
Do you know what? What did I learn most? I think what I learned most was the need for that partnership. And my husband and I have a strong partnership even today. And I went to January 2020. It was right at the start of COVID, and I went out to Sri Lanka, and I was there for their graduation, for this Chartered Institute Marketing graduation. And I was asked to go and see one of the study centres. And I remember going into this room. It was a concrete shack, for want of a better word, down this alleyway. There was so many people crammed into this room. And I remember being asked, I can't even remember what the question was, but the answer I gave was, the most important thing you need is to have a really strong partnership for you to succeed. And I'll come back to what I think succeed means, because that's played a big part in my thinking as well. But for you to succeed in work and life, I think you need to have a really strong partnership, have the support around you, because there's more to life than working. So if I come back to, what does success look like?
Yeah.
As a kid, I remember looking at my dad and saying, I want to be more successful than my dad. My dad was the UK sales director for Pfizer. And he was the sales director when Viagra came to market. And I remember watching him. He worked very, very hard. And I remember watching him go and do sales kickoffs. And so he was going all over the world, doing all sorts of amazing things, which I also quite liked the look of. And so for me, I wanted to be more successful than my dad. And what I realized when I was had my family, got the twins, a very loving relationship with my husband. And what I realized, that success wasn't about climbing a ladder. Success was about being happy, having a happy family life, being together. And so that attention with the kids, and for me, always being able to work from home. My husband's always worked from home. Arguably, we've therefore always been there. And so one of the ways I've rolled that into how we work at the CCMA is we all work remotely. We also work very flexibly, in that I've always wanted to go and see the kids in their nativity or in their sports day, in the, whatever it is. And, I shouldn't be taking time off to go and do that. I work hard, I'll make it up another time. So for me, that flexibility and that balance of work and home life, I think is really, really valuable.
Yeah, ambition is an individual thing, isn't it? You
Mm,
can't you can look it up in a dictionary, but actually everyone's interpretation of what that means is completely different.
yeah.
So yeah, so how did you get from being in Sri Lanka, consulting, doing the board of the Chartered Institute into where you are now? So where did it come about, the CCMA? Where did that come as an opportunity?
So, back in 2003-4, I remember someone, this is when I was at Sabio, I remember someone saying to me, you should really do more with the CCMA, they're doing great stuff. And it was like, who? Who's that? Don't know who that is. And that was when I first met Anne-Marie Stagg. And stayed in touch with Anne-Marie. We supported the awards, we supported Anne-Marie and what she was doing with the CCMA. And then in about 2014, Anne-Marie, and you know, I was still keeping in touch with Anne-Marie, she decided to, instead of running CCMA from her bedroom of a weekend and evening, she decided to go, right, I'm now going full time on this. And she got in touch with me and said, after about a year of taking me out for lunch, and you know, we talk about what she was doing and where the direction she was going in. She said, decided I need a marketing strategy, and I want to I want to now pay you for some work. I said, brilliant. What's your business plan? And she said, oh, I haven't got one of those. I said, should we start there? So at this point, CCMA was about 20 years old and had never had a real business plan. So that's where we started. And over the course of the next few years, we would review the marketing plan, review the business plan, look at what the potential was, and you know, just oodles of potential. And Anne-Marie was like, yep, love that, but let's not do that just yet. So I could see that there was a lot of potential that we weren't necessarily taking full advantage of. And then when Anne-Marie got in touch with me and said, would you help me because I want to retire? And so I thought, well, actually, I think there's something more I can do here. And that's when I said, why don't I take it over? And I remember at the time, I mean, that Anne-Marie had the biggest shoes. She's a massive name in the industry. Everybody knew her. And I was a who? Nobody knows who I am. In the marketing world, yep. Being chair of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, that's quite a big thing. But in contact centres, it was, who on earth is this? Who on earth is going to take over the CCMA, and what on earth is she going to do with it? And for me, I was sat thinking, well, I can market an industry, use my marketing skills, my knowledge of working in a membership body through the CIM, but also other membership bodies that I'd worked in, and the fact that I'd actually been in the industry for 20 years, my view was, actually, I've got this. I can really help here by bringing those things together, and it almost felt like I'd come home. Everything I'd been working towards was kind of like, here it is. And I remember one of the first things that I really wanted to do was rebrand from the Call Centre Management Association, but I couldn't. I had to prove to the industry that I wasn't going to hurt it, I wasn't going to break it. I wanted to make a really good, positive difference. So I think it was only 2 or 3 years later that it was like, okay, I think we're ready now to rebrand. And now, you know, when I think about what we do and the feedback we get from members around how we help them individually, but also helping their teams, their contact centres, their organisations. I can't tell you how proud I am of the team and what they are doing for members in the wider industry today.
So a bit like when you pick up a recipe, you know, when you kind of read it through, ultimately that recipe is like the culture. So what's the ingredients in your culture at CCMA? What kind of makes it great for you to feel that's kind of a tick in the box and you're doing the right thing?
One is that we absolutely care about what we're doing, and for me it's very reflective therefore of the industry. As an industry, we care about our customers, we care about the people we work with, from the well-being piece to the career opportunities to the respecting each other. That for me is a real key part of creating the right culture. If someone had said to me 20, 30 years ago, you are going to lead a team of predominantly female people, I would have gone, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. That for me 30 years ago, where I'd been used to a very male-dominated environment, I thought that's going to be so difficult. But actually, the team we have has so much respect for each other, and there's not the behaviours that I thought there might have been, and that for me is really, really valuable.
Where's that caring bit come from? Where in the life journey, where in the career journey has that kind of thing about wanting to create a purpose come from?
That's a really good question. I think the purpose piece, I think for me was probably my time at CIM. The care piece, I think, comes probably from being a mum. And when I had my twins, they were prem, they were tiny. My son was £2, my daughter was £3, a massive £3.9, and I think I wasn't a natural mum. I went back to work after 6 months, very much with the view of if I was born to look after children, I would be a teacher, or but I was very aware of that, and I think the self-awareness has made me much more aware of that care piece.
It's a challenge, isn't it, to fight the demons of what our culture says you should do versus like what you want to do. And again, it's a personal thing. So how have you balanced that, kids? Because your daughter's a real inspiration in terms of what she's achieving and everything. Yeah. So how have you balanced that through your journey?
Yeah, do you know what? You're right. My daughter is a massive inspiration, being a highly competitive swimmer. And she's probably the one I talk about a lot. Actually, my son's a massive inspiration. He's a grade 8 pianist. He's recently got gold DV. He's doing other stuff and he wants to be a rocket scientist, and it's like, wow. So I think that one of the things I've always wanted to show them was a happy family environment, a supportive family environment. I've always said, do what you enjoy doing. So with Holly in the swimming, 3 or 4 years ago, she was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But it was really obvious she loved it. Reflecting back, we now know why she didn't want to do it. But it's always been, do what you love doing, do what you enjoy doing. And so that's the kind of environment we've tried to build, so they're in a safe, supportive place to be able to achieve whatever they want to achieve. But now when I think about CCMA and when people say, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, well, I don't really work because I love what I do. And they always say, if you love what you do, you'll never work again.
Yeah, agreed. So, like I said, you really are an inspiration to a lot of people now in terms of the role that you play and what you're trying to do differently. And we'll come on to a bit more about what CCMA are doing. But who have you been shaped by then? Because you talked about a couple of people during the career, but there must be more than that. There must be other people that you either read about or you reflect upon that says, actually, they kind of helped me decide how I wanted to be as a leader.
For me, that's a really difficult question to answer, because I think I come back to that awareness piece. I feel like I am very self-aware. I know what I think I'm good at. I know what I'm really not good at. And so being able to lean into those that can fill that void, I think is really important. But I do a lot of listening, which arguably is something that my dad said I don't do. But I actually now, again, that's one of those other pieces of feedback, actually listen. So I do a lot of listening, and then I start to kind of digest that and then whatever comes out of here or comes out in my actions is because I've listened. I'm not necessarily going to tell you I've listened, but I have been listening.
Okay, so on the reflective piece then, so if you could go back in a time machine and speak to you 25 years ago, what would you whisper in the ear that would be that kind of like counsel, or think about something differently? What would you tell yourself?
It would be to start listening earlier. My dad wasn't wrong. I didn't listen, but it would be to start listening earlier, and that I was told this very day actually that I should film me on stage, and so that I can continue to learn from that. And there's a whole part of me that goes, the idea of watching me on camera is, I don't like that idea, but actually being able to go back and watch and learn, I think is actually very powerful. So I think it's that go and listen and go and learn earlier.
So talking about our industry then, what do you think? I mean, you've been on Radio 4 today and obviously been at the coalface talking about it, but what do you see as the biggest challenges in the industry that you love and you nurture day to day?
So I think it's coming out in conversations all the time at the moment that I'm having. I think our biggest challenge is actually making sure that those outside of the industry, so I'm talking about the senior leaders, the CFOs of this world, properly understand the value of the contact center and human conversations. Not just the value of the contact center, because that's something that we talk about. Our superpower is the data insights. We can, make or break brands, all that kind of stuff. But right now, I think it's making sure that others recognize the value of the human conversation. And as I was reflecting on this morning, I'm so aware of not going with the times. I'm so aware of not keeping things fresh and getting stuck in, well, contact centres, it's always been a people-led, surely it's now technology, it should be moving forward. And that actually maybe this view of human conversations is dated. But actually, I don't think it is. I think that those human conversations are even more important now because of the threat and risk of technology than even they were as we were coming out of COVID, where we know the human conversation was more important. So I think that is our biggest challenge right now.
And what's the biggest challenge for you in your organisation, getting your message out to those leaders then?
We've got too much to say. That's our genuinely our biggest issue at the moment. There's so much that we do to help members and the broader industry. Just trying to say, that there's all of these different things that you could be taking advantage of. Come and take advantage of it. And just trying to get that message out is really, really difficult. But one of the steps for us is thinking about the message and the voice of our industry. So yes, Radio 4, we want to be doing more of that because we want to try and help change society's perception of our industry. On the Radio 4 programme, I was asked about whether contact centres still use scripting. I was like, God, no.
Yeah.
That went out with the dark ages, but society still thinks that's something that we do. So that for me is one of the challenges I think we have from a society perspective.
So you've got so much going on, and I suppose other leaders have so much going on. So what should you stop doing, and what would you say to leaders in the industry that they should stop doing?
Good question. What should we stop doing? I think people would say for us that we probably just need to slow down a little bit. We've been trying to bring in lots of new stuff, and it's like, do you know what? We actually just need to take stock for a bit. So I think from my perspective, because I'm always looking for the next thing, just take stock and process actually where we are right now. I think for others, I I can actually get on a bit of a soapbox about this. I wish people would stop criticising our industry. That for me is something that, if I look at it from a PR perspective, when you start criticising from the PR perspective, the view of our industry can spiral downwards. And when I think who is criticising our industry, yes, Joe Public out there criticising us, and it's because they don't necessarily fully understand what we do. So I think there's an education piece there. But what really winds me up is when people within the industry criticise the industry or criticise those within it. And I think we're in this together. We're all learning. It's an industry where we're all trying desperately to do our best for our customers, for our colleagues. So I just wish people would stop criticising and instead start supporting and helping and nurturing us forward.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, because I see more and more, I see less and less young people coming through. And, our kids are a similar age and that sort of thing. And you kind of would, if you would say to our kids now, do you want to get in the industry? They'd be like, what industry? So to your point, they come with a negative connotation of it because of the way that they interact with it and everything as well. So how are you making a step change for people to think positively then? What is CCMA doing?
So as well as trying to get out onto things like radio, one of the biggest things that we're launching this year is National Contact Centre Day. It's taking place on the 4th of March, and it's the first one. We are trying to galvanise as much of the industry as possible to celebrate this day. Why? We've got a theme of contact centre as a career. That's the theme this year. And as well as it being an opportunity for the industry in their operations, on site, remotely as well, to be able to go, do you know what, we're doing a great job here. Let's, just reflect within our own teams, but also using it as an opportunity to bring in those that don't work in the contact centre to come in and listen to the kinds of conversations that our frontline deal with, but also to see the camaraderie, to see the support, the amazing well-being work that we have, the diversity of our industry, massive diversity we've got in our industry, which is just something to celebrate. But then beyond that, we're trying to encourage contact centre leaders to bring in their local schools, their local colleges, universities, bring in other organisations, but also bring in MPs, councillors, come and see what it is to work in the contact centre industry. And I come back to, why is that important? Because contact centres can make or break businesses. We are talking to customers all the time. We know what customers want. We know what they need. We've got that insights. We've got that intelligence. We need to make sure that business leaders are listening to that intelligence, and there's no better way than going, come and see us, open the doors.
I think it's truly inspirational, the passion that you've got to lift the lid for others. It's not necessarily for you, it's for you to open the book for other people to kind of read the pages. So on that, if someone wanted to aspire to do something like what you've done, what would you give those people that kind of nugget of how do you overcome those things, especially like you said, in being so many industries, you've been being a woman in a male organized world, what would you say is the things that people should really think about?
I think it's understand what you care about, and find a way. I think there's a whole be kind in that, respect each other. There's all of that comes into that. But I think arguably what underlines all of that is the importance of people and connections, building those relationships. I think is fundamental to being able to achieve what you want to achieve. And that isn't about building a relationship and standing on toes. It's actually building relationships, understanding. I remember something my granddad once said to me was, accept people for who they are. So it's not about meeting someone and going, oh, they're not on the same page as me, so therefore I'm not going to talk to them, or dismissing them. It's actually understanding them and accepting them for who they are, and learning how to work with them so that you can achieve, because invariably we're all trying to achieve the same thing in this industry, and we achieve that together.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it's a
really
pleasure.
interesting. Some things I never knew, and some nuggets of things that I'm sure other people will take something from. So thanks very much for coming and joining us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. This has been fun.